I'd like to thank everybody for attending the Justice for All rally today. A special thanks to all of you who are here this afternoon who have band together in the unity of a common cause as Americans seeking justice in the cause of Palestine. Today, Houston communities will make their voices heard. The Islamic Circle of North America's goals by organizing this event are to foster peace and justice in the United States of America. Our goals are to educate everyone on the greatness of our religion of Islam and also to distance ourselves in the utmost from those who seek to distort it through extremism. Criminals who decide to kill in its name cannot hijack Islam. Just the same, Judaism and Christianity cannot be hijacked by the criminals who choose to kill in their names. In fact, the very word Islam itself means to gain peace. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, related through Abraham, all promote justice and condemn the murdering of innocent civilians. The Islamic Circle of North America encourages all Americans to stand united in the support of the greatest virtues and to share these virtues around the world by treating others as we would be treated. The old saying, "United we stand," does not stand alone. Never forget the other half of that saying, that is, divided we fall. The purpose of the Justice for All rally is to foster relationships that we as Americans depend on to establish sound systems of justice and to promote peace in America and around the world. Our purpose is to remind ourselves and educate our elected officials that we share common goals. As Americans, we all remain vigilant in the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. And as Americans, we not only seek justice for those murdered in our land, justice is not just for Americans. As people of conscience, we demand justice for everyone, of every race, of every nationality, and every creed. And in this rally, we demand justice for Palestine. Our elected officials must know that an ever-increasing number of Americans are becoming aware that our tax dollars are being used to brutalize innocent Palestinian people. We want you to know that even before this rally, Houston voices have been heard in Washington, D.C. Congressman Culberson has replied to a letter that ICNA and MPAC sent to him, thanking us for informing him of our peaceful rally here today. He was deeply troubled by one of the many speakers in the Washington, D.C. rally on April 20th, who he perceived to be calling for a violent uprising against our nation's capital. Since some of the other speakers were from some of our organizations, he associated our event with the organization of this one man who is unknown to us. Speaking to the congressman's stated concern, the Islamic Circle of North America denounces anyone's inflammatory rhetoric that calls for violence, and we distance ourselves from those who would encourage violence. And we stand firm in our right to peaceably assemble and promote all nonviolent means to change public opinion as well as the policies in Washington. However, let's not divert too much from the real issue. As Americans, we are told to contact our congressman whenever we have a concern. We have contacted Congressman Culberson and thus far have not gotten results. We will stand firm in our right to utilize the American system to make our voices heard, and we demand results. And our request to meet with the congressman still stands. Today we are here exercising our right to peaceably assemble and rally against U.S. support of Israeli terrorism. The U.S. financial and military support is a problem that has plagued our foreign policy for decades and is responsible for the needless deaths of thousands of Palestinians and Israelis alike. It is also responsible for the lost homes and shattered lives of millions of Palestinians. At the same time, we want to show Congress our support for the American system of justice and our concern that the American system of justice has been hijacked by a brutal form of Zionist philosophy that the religion of Judaism does not even support. We want the Congressman and former President George Bush to send our message of peace, justice, and solidarity with the Palestinian people to Washington. We call on all Americans, especially our elected officials, whether Jewish, whether Christian, whether Muslim, or any other creed, to stand firm in the cause of justice for the Palestinian people. Stop sponsoring terrorism. Stop funding Israel until it abides by international resolutions 100%. Not 99, not 95, 100%. Stop creating a new generation whose only hope is to resist brutal Israeli occupation. End Israeli occupation now. And I would like to introduce to you, if I could find her, Hannah Hawk. She's with the Houston chapter of Muslim Public Affairs Council, and she's been assisting the Islamic Circle of North America in making this event a success.
Assalamu alaikum. May God's peace be with you all, and all who have joined us on this hot, humid day in Houston to stand for justice and liberty for all, and take social action and exercise our constitutional rights to assemble in the way that we are, in the peaceful way that we are, for social change. The Muslim Public Affairs Council strives to establish an American Muslim identity regardless of race or ethnicity or gender, and to make this body an influential component in U.S. politics on all levels of the policymaking arena, city, state, and national. Israel offers its citizens free health care, free education, and a standard of living that beats that in most U.S. cities. All this and more is made possible by our hard-earned tax dollars. We call today on Congress to abandon its unjust and undeniably pro-Israel bias and to begin to reflect the true sentiment of the American people. Israel is either with us or against us, to use the words of our president. Israel would not be able to act with such callousness were it not for America's unconditional support on all of these levels that I've mentioned, political, military, and economic. Israel is dependent on U.S. foreign aid to survive. Americans should have something to say about this money and how it is being spent. It is our taxpayer money. Number two, it's important for us to develop a balanced policy in the Mideast because our trade ties would be negatively affected otherwise. More simply put, this means loss of more American jobs. With the Enron collapse, Houston perhaps understands this more than any other city in the nation right now. Third, Congress and elected officials have a responsibility that we have given them as the ones who voted for them to reflect the image of our people, not to reflect the lobbies that they serve. America stands for justice. It's about reputation. The great thing about being an American is that we have the power to create our own destiny. That's not so in many countries. We have a short attention span. A person with a bad reputation is easily forgiven in America, sometimes simply by jumping into the spotlight and poking fun at their own bad judgments, such as our former president. We ask for Congress to please take the responsibility now and reflect the true image of our people, the true sentiment of the American public, of those who stand for peace, not those who stand for their own agendas. Our Congress members, for instance, have been denied the facts. We are having this rally today for a main reason, to raise awareness. Not only to raise awareness of our fellow Americans, of what is going on, of the atrocities going on in our name. We do not want this to go on in our name. We also would like to educate our Congress members. They have been manipulated by events that have been presented in a biased manner to Congress. They have been led to believe that we have only one friend, that we have only Israel as our ally. which has led a selective application of foreign policies that negatively affects us as Americans. Why is it that we have such a narrow view of the world? If you go to Europe or Asia, they have a completely different view. For instance, the war crimes going on in the refugee camps. Yes, I said war crimes going on in the refugee camps of Jenin. Europe and Asia and others, they know the reality of what is going on. Americans don't know. That's why we are here. The fact is that the media is run by corporations that have a number of international businesses, including those that build arms for countries in the Middle East. For instance, GE, General Electric. The slogan says, "We build good things for life." Did you know that GE builds propulsion systems for F-16s? So the special interest groups go in on the international side, lobby our Congress, and ultimately affect our domestic policy. American Indian reservations and Palestinian refugee camps. Two different names, both are one and the same, just different rhetoric. With regard to the atrocious living conditions of the Palestinian people, for the United States to say that we as a nation should continue to support this kind of oppression, to support this kind of racism, to support this kind of apartheid, will further isolate America. We demand from our Congress investigations into the mass murder of Palestinian civilians. Yes, I said investigation, especially in the Jenin refugee camp. Investigations into why reporters have been targeted and shot, especially near the head, as we have seen in our major media. And also, we demand an investigation and war crimes tribunals to investigate Israeli war crimes. Violence against civilians on both sides is intolerable. While it is intolerable, the saddest byproduct of Israel's illegal occupation of the West Bank and Gaza are teenage girls, women, and secularists who may even be atheists. It's not a religious issue, people. It is not a religious issue. The saddest part is the teenage girls, women, and secularists who have joined the ranks of suicide bombers because they see no future. There is a generation of children who see no future. Now, while the violence, as I said, on both sides is indeed intolerable against civilians, against Israeli civilians, against Palestinian civilians, I ask all of you not to be distracted by from the atrocities carried out by the Israeli army. The destroying of homes while people are inside, the masses of children and families left without food, sewage systems, water, shelter, the shooting of ambulance drivers while they are racing to the injured Palestinian people, the shooting of pregnant women, the threat of violence against sacred holy sites such as the Church of the Nativity, tattooing ID numbers on prisoners, massive detentions, indiscriminate bombing and collective punishment. We, the American people, must not be distracted by the tactics to entice us to actively join in the effort to, quote, destroy those groups with fury once and for all, end quote. This ignores Israel's crimes against the Palestinians. We must not be distracted against any efforts that go against promoting justice and peace. We as Americans of conscience have begun to unite. As Americans, we should know where our tax dollars are being sent. The bottom line is that the U.S. government has the political power to stop the killing. We demand that they use it now. Today, the vast majority of citizens of the world are looking to America, to our great country, for leadership. They're looking in shared pain and emotional solidarity, but they're also looking at us in fear and anxiety and worry that America will not lead as it could and should lead. Now is the time for America, its people, that's us, its leaders, that's who we elected. It's time to understand that no man or no woman is an island, that its power and wealth bring responsibilities as well as privileges, and we must utilize all of its resources and intellect to find the answers in a serious and reflective and thoughtful manner that will lead towards a better, safer world, toward justice for all. Thank you. Peace be with you.
First of all, I'd like to make note of how very pleasing it is to see so many of you here today who have rallied in opposition of the grossly inhumane violence that is taking place, which our elected officials so recently as yesterday voiced support of by voting 94-2 in the Senate and 352-21 in the House to fully back the illegitimate desires of the tyrannical Israeli regime. It is the voice of reason. I want to ask to you, is the voice of reason really so outgunned by the American government that we stand here today in vain to protest crimes against humanity? And I'll tell you right now, no, because as a matter of ethics and as a matter of principle, it is the right thing to do. And a loud voice, regardless if it's 94 senators and 352 congressmen, a loud voice cannot compete with a clear voice, even if it's a whisper. We know the story of the confiscation of Palestine by the militant Zionist immigrants to establish Israel, and not only that, but the further legislation of the Israeli abandoned property law, which gave confiscated Palestinian property to incoming Jewish immigrants and forbade ever selling the land to any Palestinians. Now let's think about this realistically. If I were to walk into your house and say, you know what, I have the belief that God promised me this house, and I took out a gun and pointed at you and say, all right, now get out. Somebody speaks up in opposition. Bang, I shoot him dead. And I walk you and your family out the door, and I say, now don't come back. Does this make any sense? In a similar instance, if someone is going to carjack your car, and you get into an argument with this person, and the third party comes up and tells you, hey, you know what, why can't we get along? I'll tell you what, Mr. Israeli, why don't you keep the car throughout the week, and Mr. Palestinian, you can have the car on Friday nights. What do you say? Is this going to work? What is the Palestinian going to say? Of course he's going to say, no, it's not going to work. He says, that's my car. But yet, somehow, something that has happened to lead so many believe that the Israeli aggressors are the victims, and the victims, numbered in the millions, without a home to call their own, scattered throughout different countries, crowded into refugee camps with a higher than 80% unemployment rate. Somehow, we have come to think that these desperate refugees are the actual criminals behind all the violence. Now we need to ask ourselves, how bad is it actually? Since Israel's establishment founded on violence, not only against the Palestinians, but also with terrorist bombings of the English who are overseeing the region, Israeli terror has not stopped. Today I can tell you that the current Prime Minister of Israel, Ariel Sharon, doesn't dare step foot in Belgium or the Netherlands, fearing an indictment of the World Court for War Crimes. As a military leader, he is responsible for the murder of over 2,000 refugees in the Sabara and Shatila camps in Lebanon. Not only that, Israel has more prisoners per capita than any other nation in the world, more than Stalin's Russia or Red China at its worst. In fact, a Jewish human rights group in Israel confirmed in a 60-page report that 85% of Palestinian detainees undergo torture while in captivity. And during this last week of fighting, we've seen Palestinians arrested in masses up to 8,000 at a time. With an all too obvious blessing of the United States, numerous methods of killing, torture, terror, arbitrary arrests, violation of sacred places, deliberately starving the people and confiscating their property, destroying towns, refugee camps, and houses, and preventing even ambulances from attending the wounded or taking the bodies of the dead for burial are unabatedly being perpetrated under the eyes of the whole world. Now let's not kid ourselves. Everyone in the world knows that the United States put Israel on the map. And to date, the lifeblood of Israel consumes the largest sum of our foreign aid, over $6 billion a year. And the United States military support of Israel has built them up to be the fourth largest army in the entire world. The Arabs and the whole world know that nearly every bomb, every bullet, every tank, and every jet airplane is manufactured and paid for by Uncle Sam. It is with our support of these billions of dollars that we have enabled the Jewish state to terrorize these Arab people for nearly half a century. To date, I can tell you that there is no nation that has been so frequently condemned by the United Nations as Israel. Not only that, in the United Nations, No body of the United Nations has ever condemned an Arab nation for its attack on Israel. And lastly, but certainly not the least, never, not once, has Israel ever complied with a UN resolution that goes against its illegitimate desires. Just think, this week, the United States threatened to veto a UN Security Council resolution calling for an investigation into the Jenin refugee camp massacre. The United States finally forced to remove the word investigation from the resolution language. Yet another example of how Sharon's war against the Palestinian people is backed and protected by American policy. And I quote Ariel Sharon, I quote him, "We control America." And what a humiliation it is to the people of this country to have our elected officials humiliate our sense of ethics in front of the whole world, when the only rule of ethics that the Israelis play by is win and win at any cost. There is a blatant problem here of biasness, and we need to ask why. Now, we are used to dealing with these type of problems. If we are in our home and we go to work an appliance and it doesn't work, we ask ourselves, why are things not working the way they should? Did I not plug it in? Did I not turn it on? Maybe there's a mechanism in the machinery that prevents it from performing the way it should. Why are things not the way they should be? Now, the American people are not dumb. They're far from being dumb. In fact, a USA Today CNN Gallup poll showed that 71% of all American people said that the U.S. government should not back either side. So why is the story so different with our elected officials than what the people who elected them actually want? The truth of the matter is something that we have come to know all too well, especially here in the Bayou City with the recent fall of Enron. And this thing I speak of is the corruption of principle by the force of money. The money and power of the dozens of Jewish lobbying parties directly interested in Israel are the most influential force in American politics today. The American Israel Public Affairs Committee gives money, and a lot of it. They invest millions on political candidates and parties to an average of more than $70,000 apiece. The American Israel Public Affairs Committee can make or break any politician as it chooses. And as you see, all of our elected officials compete to please them. Just listen to the words of Texas House Minority Whip Republican Tom DeLay, who said, addressing the conference of the American Israel Public Affairs Committee this last week, and I quote him, "As long as I'm in Congress, I'll use every tool at my disposal to ensure that the Republican Conference in the House of Representatives continues to preserve and strengthen America's alliance with the State of Israel." Now, just as a litmus test to this, what I've said about our elected officials, let's see if Congressman John Culberson will do anything or send anyone out here to address us here today at our request, or will we be ignored? But it doesn't only stop at American politics. The American mainstream media, too, with the millions that are invested in PR representation, I ask of you, why does the European Union and the United Nations and the whole world, in fact, stand against us on this one? Do we, the American people, know something that the whole rest of the world is ignorant of? No, I don't think so. Just take a look at other international news sources and you'll see the difference. Where does all this money come from? Well, perhaps you may have heard of some of Israelis' financial backers actively have worked within our society, like, for example, AOL Time Warner, IBM, Coca-Cola. If you go to the grocery store, Libby's Juicy Juice, Nestle. Maybe some of us here today are wearing clothes like Gap, Tommy Hilfiger. Maybe some of the ladies here are wearing makeup by Revlon, Estee Lauder, and the list goes on and on and on. They have an almost unquenchable amount of money to spend on these policies. And at what cost does the money-hungry politicians who are supposed to represent the interests of our nation, not another nation, bring upon the backs of the good people of this country? They share a large part of the responsibility of the tragic crime that befell our nation on September 11th by creating a political atmosphere by which the militants use as the root of by which the militants see us as the root of oppression befalling the Arabs for over half a century. and by the one-sided allegiance to Israel that our Congress displayed yesterday in their voting, they are trying to extinguish the fire of rebellion these desperate and violated people act upon by adding gas instead of water to the flame of frustration, grief, and anger that burns in the hearts of these people being killed by American weapons. So, we have our elected officials to thank for making America look bad in front of not only the frustrated European Union and the United Nations, but in front of the entire world. These politicians have put American civilians and servicemen, not only abroad, but in our own office buildings, in our own homes. These politicians have put us in harm's way, not at the interest of those they were elected to represent, but for the monies that feed themselves and their political careers. Now, I want to end by saying to those people whose ears this speech reaches today that you have a responsibility. You have a responsibility to stand up and say what is wrong. And don't let anybody kid you. Just because you don't agree with the terror and the violence that's going on in the hands of the Israeli government, that does not make you anti-Semitic. The Jewish people in this crowd here today, they'll tell you that. And to exercise your constitutional right to say that you don't agree with the American government does not make you unpatriotic. In fact, if you see the course of our policy is taking the ship towards the rock, if you are a patriot and you do in fact love this country, then you have a responsibility to stand up and say, hey, hold the boat. That is wrong. The message that we need to send to our fellow Americans, and particularly to our elected officials, is that America is not for sale. And I hope you leave here today inspired by what is right, and that you go with the blessings of God.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the most merciful and beneficent. Fellow American, we stand today together for the cause of justice, the cause of freedom and liberty, the cause of unity. If one statement in our history best combine all these great causes, it's our pledge of allegiance, where we join hand as one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice for all. We remind ourselves of the value the Founding Father gave to liberty and freedom, to the extent that Patrick Henry stood in the Virginia legislature and said, I know not what course other may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. Today, we see the same statements being played out as people fight for liberty and freedom all over the world, but particularly in Palestine. As Muslims, we identify with the same noble principles as taught to us in the Quran. O you who believe, stand out firmly for justice, as a witness to your Lord, even though it be against yourselves, or your parents, or your kin, be he rich or poor. God is a better protector to both parties than you. So we stand firmly today for justice. When we look at the history of America, it is these very causes that allow us to claim greatness. As long as we continue to call for these ideals and principles and stand up for these rights, we will continue to be a great nation. When we led the fight against Nazi Germany and the oppression of the Axis power, we were standing for justice and freedom. When we demanded the British, the French, and the Israeli to retreat from Egypt in 1956, we stood as a nation for justice. When we supported the South Korean, we were defending freedom. Kosovo was about standing against injustice and aggression. When we led the war against apartheid in South Africa, we reminded the planet of the unity of all the races and justice. Today we stand together to remind our leaders that we must once again reclaim those ideals: justice, freedom, liberty, and unity. We must call for the end of the occupation of Palestine and freedom and justice for all refugees and those suffering in the Holy Land. The Palestinians' cause is synonymous with these great ideals. These are the people who lost their homes to an invading force, and many have been living in refugee camps since 1947. The world has recognized their plea in numerous United Nations resolutions calling for the end of occupation, but to no end. They are people with no army to defend themselves against a well-trained and well-equipped force. The real tragedy is that American tax dollars pay for the military weapon being used in the occupied territories. Our leader should not forget the spirit of the Constitution and its defense of the oppressed and its call for justice for all. The Palestinian people are simply asking for their fundamental rights to live, to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. These are rights which we all relate to, which we enjoy daily, and which we hold dearly. As far off as the Middle East may seem, and as difficult as it may be to understand the suffering that continues there, we must accept our role as Americans, as members of this republic. We must also not forget the threat to our own freedom and constitutional rights. With each day, we are witnessing the U.S. Constitution being compromised. Secret evidence law, the Patriot Act, the lack of due process, and the elimination of the attorney-client privileges are just a few examples for the freedom and rights that we have lost recently. These are issues that we must not forget as we rally for justice. We ask you to call upon our leaders and the elected officials, the President, the administration, and the Congress. Remind them of what makes America a great nation and how our continued support of Israel occupation directly contradict the noble American values of freedom and justice for all. Assalamu alaikum.
La ilaha illallah.
We must understand that while our country gives $3 billion to the state of Israel, 2 million of our own people sleep as homeless in this country. That while the $3 billion dollars are given to the state of Israel, nearly 3 million people in this country sleep hungry every night. We must also ask the question that why is it that this kind of decisions are being taken by Congress at a time when 71% of the nation and the people in this country are against our one-sided support to Israel, when more than 70% of the Americans are asking Bush administration and Congress to take an even-handed support and even-handed policy towards Israel, yet the government supports the state of Israel and gives them all a kind of weapons to be used against the Palestinians. And we must demand from the congressmen to be on the side of justice at this time. But also, we must also remember that the Congress would not change unless we ourselves are willing to be active and be part of the political process here and be involved in the political decisions in whatever manner, in whatever shape and form. We are peaceful people, and we believe that through peaceful negotiations and through peaceful cooperation and peaceful procession, we can influence the decisions of the Congress here and elsewhere. The country, majority of the country, believes on the right of the Palestinians to exist as a nation. Majority of the country believes that the Palestinians should have a homeland. Majority of the country believes that the Israelis should not be given $3 billion that are being given to them. But the point here is that our Congress is being held hostage by a lobby that serves the interest of a foreign country, not the interest of these people. These people who are supporting Israel are the people who have been manipulated by a Congress, by a lobby that serves the interest of the state of Israel rather than the interest of this people. And that's why the Sharon, when he says that I control America, he means that his lobby controls the American congressmen. And this is what we must make clear, that as part of this country, as citizens of this country, we too have a stake here. We too have a claim here. We too are equal citizens, and we demand that we be given the right to be heard in Congress and other places. But this will not happen unless we ourselves become involved, unless we ourselves become part of that thing. And for that particular reason, the Muslim Public Affairs Council will organize a citizens forum in all congressional districts throughout this year, not only focusing on Palestine or in India or in Gujarat or other places, but also in the empowerment of the people here, for African Americans, for Hispanics, and for all those people who are deprived for their rights in this country. So we will organize these forums and we will ask you to join those things. But the most important thing is to remember that our struggle is a peaceful struggle. Despite the fact that the Congress has been taken over by the Zionist lobby, despite the fact that more than 70% of the congressmen are supportive of Israel wholeheartedly, we must not lose hope, because at one time this country denied voting rights to women and voting rights to blacks, and yet this country today gives those rights to those people. So we must not ignore the reality that there is a power in this country to be changed, and that change is possible only when we are involved. But the important thing is that we must be involved not only in our mosque, but through the churches, through the synagogues, and through all other people. There are people outside who believe in the same values as we believe. There are people who believe in democracy. There are people who believe in justice. And when we present our case to them in the language which they understand, then the change is possible and change will come. But the change will come only when we are willing to bring about those changes.
Thank you for everybody, all the organizations that came out here and displayed a spirit of unity. We have a very large sponsorship. I would like to thank the sponsors that contributed financially and otherwise: the Islamic Circle of North America, who organized this event; Muslim American Society; Muslim Public Affairs Council, who assisted in this event; Islamic Society of Greater Houston; Council on American Islamic Relations; Islamic Education Center; Houstonians for Peace and Justice in the Holy Land; El Noor Society of Greater Houston; El Farouk Foundation, Mecca Masjid; KILE 1560 AM radio; KPFT 90.1 FM radio; KGOL 1180 AM radio, and the Mirror newspaper. May God bless you, and as well as all of those who have contributed who have not been mentioned. Thank you.
Occupation is a crime! Free Palestine!
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, here they are. So you want to go pantry to the pantry? For what? Monday? Stay here, huh?
Free Palestine! Occupation is a crime! Free Palestine! Occupation is a crime!
They know this tape's for them, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Sorry?
You have a card, like
I really don't, but you can get in touch with the HPD. They'll have a case. Cover your case.
God bless you. Jesus Christ died for you.
You too, sir. God love you too.
Thank you. God bless you. Jesus Christ died for you. Yes. God bless you. Jesus Christ died for you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Praise the Lord.
You gotta go to stop telling you to go. Of this whole thing, so they can see how good they did. It's crowd control, because they said a lot of times cops come out and they think they got to be real mean to everybody.
Oh, yeah.
No, they did an excellent job. Yeah, sure. Make it a zip on cooking. I think so, yeah. But because of a nice Shiite brother, we had that loudspeaker. He donated. Because of one Shiite brother, we had that big loudspeaker. No, you're fine. Hope you don't mind being on tape. Where's your pet pass? I don't need one. You didn't come in the 11 van? So,
Everybody right there.
man. Marco, I need a big.